Any critiques on the grilling skills?
Well, no, they were good. You put chips and salsa with hamburgers. That's an interesting touch.
Nobody goes to a picnic or a cookout and has chips and salsa and a hamburger?
It's fine. Johnny's stealing my joke 15 seconds into the podcast.
I didn't
see how this is going to go.
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here. Thanks for listening. Thanks to our Patreon supporters for sponsoring the podcast. Shout out to Sandy Joy for being our Patreon supporter, and to the Clean Comedy Challenge. Don't forget, those dates are coming up soon, hard and fast, and if you want to get involved, you can go to cleancomedychallenge.com to find out more details about the locations and availability of spots. Always a good time from everybody that's ever taken the Clean Comedy Challenge. I've got several good friends that have been through the process, and they all rave about it. So if you're thinking about doing something like that, jump on it right now. Hey, today I've got a little episode about just some things that are going on in the comedy world. You know, if this was a daily podcast, I'd be ripping the UP and API wire right off the printer and reading the stories of the day, or going to Twitter and picking them up. But a few things have happened in the past few weeks that involve comedy a little bit more in the spotlight. The first thing being the White House Correspondents Dinner with Michelle Wolfe, where, there was a lot of mixed reaction on how that went. And we just discussed, did she do her job? Did the people hiring her do their job? Did the people who attend understand what comedy is? And all points in between. Comedy is definitely subjective. But since I'm a comic, a lot of my friends, people I know that don't do comedy, were asking me what I thought. And I share my opinion here in a little bit. Also talk about Netflix. My goodness, they're releasing about 75 comedy specials a day. Not sure if I can keep up with all of it. Not sure if I should keep up with all of it. Not sure if I'm only mad about it because I don't have a Netflix special. But man, I'm curious of the long-reaching effects of putting out that many specials. And is it going to get so watered down like it did with cable TV back in the 80s and early 90s that people start tuning out and the quality starts going down because these live streaming platforms, these downloadable, binge-worthy platforms like Netflix and whatnot, they just need content. They need something for you to devour. And I wonder if the quality control is going to be there long-term with that. We talk about that in a minute. And then we talk about staying close to comedy friends and overall just talking about the comedy brotherhood / sisterhood of knowing other comics, knowing what they go through, and connecting with them. Even though you may only have worked with them once or twice, you have a lasting impression of that person. And comics, seems like every 2 or 3 months now, somebody passes away that I know, and we talk about that. So grab your seatbelts, grab your coffee, sit back, relax, listen to Jonnie W.and Brian Bates and myself talk about those 3 topics, and I'll talk to you more on the back end about some upcoming appearances where we can bump into each other. Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here today with Jonnie W. and Brian Bates. How's it going, fellas?
Terrific.
Great. Wonderful.
Hey, Thanks for coming by today. It's good to have you guys over. We're going to cover just a few topics today, kind of a handful of just things that are kind of going on right now in the world of comedy. One topic we'll talk about will be the White House Correspondents Dinner, our different takes on that. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a lot of people ask me my take on it that aren't comedians. We'll talk about the proliferation of Netflix specials, good, bad, only bad because we don't have one of ourselves yet.
Right. Jealous.
Jealous. And what it's doing for comedy in general, who knows? And then we'll talk a little bit about the brotherhood of comedy. We've had a comedian pass away recently that we all crossed paths with at some point, but didn't know extremely well, but you still feel that connection to comics you work with. I think out of the respect of the grind that goes with being a comedian. I've said many times on the podcast, I respect anybody that does this for a living, even though I may not respect their act sometimes or how they are off stage with their family or whatever it might be. But
it feels weird to get Bates on here and start bringing them up.
right in front of him. But they say the first step to getting better is admission. So we're going to make him submit.
Brian, your comedy's affected this family in the following way.
The reason you're here, my friend, your show's fine. It's not that.
It's off stage.
So I guess we'll start off with the White House Correspondents Dinner. This may air quite a while after that, but I think people will still be talking about it for a while. And I know I've got asked about it just from all kinds, from religious friends, from non-religious friends, from political friends, but all from people who don't do comedy.
Yeah.
And pretty universally, the side I'm getting from them is that it was a complete failure, a complete didn't do the job they were asked to do, didn't do what the people who hired her expected from her. All negative. I haven't heard any person that's not a comic going, "Hey, freedom of speech." You get it, you give it back. So I'm going to start just with Jonnie, and I'll come back around and give you my take on it. What was your feeling? First off, I guess I assume you both watched or listened to it. Okay.
Yeah, and I saw a bunch of the quotes from it too. Like you'd see, and see tweets about it and people taking quotes in or out of context from it and just posting those up. Which we know when you put a show together, somebody can take one line out of your show and doesn't understand that. Maybe you were leading an audience to a dark place, and then you all of a sudden throw this line in. But if you just took that one line, you'd be like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, and maybe you're not happy to be here.
Right? Yeah, I think there was some of that. But I don't know. Like, I think I would probably look at it differently if I wasn't a comedian. I'm more likely to defend a comedian or free speech. But also, I looked at like the history of those dinners, and there have been irreverent people. It's part of what makes our government great in my mind is that you can get in there and lampoon our leaders and kind of satirize them. Was she beyond the pale? Probably. I mean, I wouldn't have gone up and done some it's one thing to be pro-choice. It's another thing to be pro-abortion. Like she had a joke that was literally pro-abortion, like we should abort as many babies as we can, kind of a joke. And you're like, wow, that's a really tasteless joke for the press corps. It's like, okay. But at the same time, if they vetted her properly, they know her show, they know she's incredibly left-leaning, and I don't know. I think I have less of a problem with it. She said some things I wouldn't have said, but it's one of those things like I'll defend her right to say it, and they probably should have done their due diligence better. So I don't know.
Yeah. What about you, Bates?
I agree with a lot of what Jonnie said. I watched it live. I was excited to watch it, and I saw an interview with her before it aired talking about how it's a really tough room. It's a huge, giant ballroom, and with huge ceilings, and there's a lot of people there that they're sitting around round tables. Yeah. It's not obviously not an ideal comedy setup. I think she's really funny. I don't know her personally, but all the comedians I know that do know her really respect her, and I think she's really funny. However, and when I watched it, I just thought, boy, a lot of these jokes are either too far or just didn't land. The stuff about Trump is so broke and some of that, I just didn't think those were very funny. And then some of the other one I just thought was inappropriate. In years past, the president sits up there at the table and everyone, just like the boss of a company, you look to that person to see if you can laugh or not. And when the president's laughing, or the boss of a company's laughing, then everyone feels more relaxed to laugh.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that there, it just seems like it's a little bit more biting, a little bit more attacking. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders up there, and she really went after her. And that just made it that much more awkward with her sitting right there, which I gotta think she's got to know, though, that maybe she's going to be in some of those lines of attack. But at the same time, they know Michelle Wolfe. And if they'd done any vetting, they would have known this probably isn't going to be what you like.
The Sarah Sanders stuff was the interesting part because you could always tell somebody's political leanings and not understanding the nuances of a joke because, like they said, well, she attacked Sarah's appearance. And if you read the joke, she didn't. She said, I like how she can take all of Trump's lies and burn them down into an ash and make a smoke and use it to make a perfect smoky eye. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, she's making fun of Sarah. It's like, no, she's saying like you tell lies for a living every day. That was the part you should have either been offended by, but that was the joke. So this idea that like, oh, a woman is attacking another woman's appearance or they're fat shaming Sarah Huckabee or whatever they said. I just thought that's somebody not paying attention to the nuance of what she was saying. I agree with Bates. Some of the jokes just didn't land. And some of it was mean-spirited, and it would have been way better had Trump attended because, like you said, it looks like you're a good sport. It's like when they say something to you on the Emmys, and they're, the guy comes out to the monologue and he says something about Tom Cruise. They always cut to Tom Cruise kind of smirking and laughing, and it makes everybody kind of breathe in. Okay, all right, Tom Cruise gets it that he's not got that big of an ego. He can laugh at himself. But when Trump just refuses to go 2 years in a row, which he has, it just makes it look like you're just kicking somebody when they're not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, I thought I've watched maybe the past 3 or 4 presidents sit at those things, and of course Obama knew that he just got Bin Laden when he was on the last one.
Right.
And so he's sitting back there with an ace up his sleeve, like, I don't care what happens tonight. Tomorrow we're going to tell him that I just went out there and probably part of him.
Thought of that. That's a great point.
Could you imagine being the president going, I just got the number 1?
No, I don't think that's right though. I think they hadn't won in yet, had they?
He knew the plan, or he
knew the plan, but I don't think it had been administered yet. So in a way, he should have been more nervous than ever.
I'll have to go back and look. 'Cause I remember him talking about that, like he had I think they got him. I'll have to check.
All right.
But either way, it was getting really close.
Okay.
If they had got him.
It was the next night he had announced it to the American people, but I thought they just knew it was about to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, go ahead.
But then also to Obama, at least, like the press loved him.
Yeah.
So like to attend that's like, hey, it's my party. When Trump attended the last Obama one, I mean, they went after him pretty hard, and I'm pretty sure that's why he doesn't go now. It's like, they got me already.
Right.
Plus, I mean, I'm not a pro-Trump politic type guy at all, but if I was president, there'd be a lot of those things I wouldn't go to. Just because it's been a tradition, I would, carve out more time for golfing or whatever I wanted to do. I would not be attending a lot of these things. Well, they all have, for sure. But at the same point, out of respect, he should have probably shown up. I think you could have got some big laughs if you'd empathize with Sarah Huckabee, because I can't think of a harder job in the country than having to go and be that buffer zone between the press and the tweets that happen every day.
That's true. If she'd said something along the lines of like that kind of took an angle of the sisterhood of like, it's hard what you're doing, and as a woman, I really respect that you go in and have to whatever. You're right.
Well, even just as a human, and I think even the left, people, the left would have to laugh at that because they understand how hard that job is. And, the press is doing their job, most of the time. They do leak a lot of stuff out and make things harder. But they're doing their job to make sure that she's held accountable, and they poke her as much as they can to get as much information. But I think she missed some opportunities for some laughs there. And the smoky eye joke, I think Michelle Wolfe loves the sound of that joke. It really isn't funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a big punchline, so she has a strong look when she says. Yeah. It's not, you can just tell sometimes when comics love the phrasing of a joke, and the room wasn't with me on that. The smoky eye, that's never going to get a laugh anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't care if your eye's on fire and you say she has a smoky eye. Well,
Yeah.
So there were a lot of jokes that didn't land. Definitely a room we've all been in those banquet rooms where it's spread out and the sound, but even the sound clips that they played on NPR would go in and out of like frequency, and they weren't very solid. So that's part of it. But I thought as a comedian, she went in there and she did what she thought was funny. And really, we all have our different parameters of what we think we should do. Mine is always, be true to myself and then do the job I'm hired to do. I'm always trying to make sure the client's happy. Now, she didn't do that. She was true to herself, and she probably did some jokes that
she had an agenda.
She had her leftist agenda, but even with that in mind, some of the jokes didn't land in front of the ideal target for those jokes. So maybe Well,
she knew it was being televised. I think she was speaking to the larger audience for sure, who thought, well, I'm not going to portray. I'm going to take this chance to roast Trump and this administration.
Yeah.
And man, like you said, it'd be easier for me to defend the free speech of it if it was like she just hit it out of the park and she said things I wouldn't have said, but man, she was funny.
Yeah.
But I agree with Bates. It's like some of it fell flat, and then I think it maybe even rattled her a little bit at some point. There was a couple times where I could see it affected her.
And I think too, and not to diminish her fame or whatever, but in the past, the roasters have been somebody you kind of knew.
Yeah, Colbert did it. And
yeah, and the last
year was another guy from The Daily Show who responded.
And so you had a little bit more familiarity.
But she's on The Daily Show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But again, that's a cable network that,
right.
Yeah.
40 and up's not watching usually.
On The Daily Show now that Stewart's gone too.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, people maybe didn't know what to expect. My main tip would be not to inhale the helium before you go on stage, because that was the hardest part for me. And I know my voice doesn't resonate with a lot of people, but just that pitch, that's hard to listen to in any room.
She can't help that. That's her voice.
That's her voice, but you don't have to stay true to that. I would go get an operation.
Oh,
I would take a sucker
This
punch
is
in the
the
gut.
dark side.
No, I just,
All right, I'm going to be moving on now.
all right. No, but she did what she was going to do. I think her main thing and her agent's probably main angle is go be memorable, and we'll build off of this.
She trended.
She's got a new show that's starting on Netflix.
Right.
That's
So
gonna help
that probably was superseding every thought was how do we make people talk about this afterwards, and she did that. So
yeah.
So did she do a good job, Matt? She missed the point on some of it. Did she do what she's hired to do? Sort of, but not all the way. But I did think she stayed true to herself for if that's good or not. So, but I would just think that is an opportunity to have a huge impact and like be recognizable for some positive and some funny things.
Yeah.
But I don't know any jokes that anybody's quoting that they say were funny. They're just saying this one didn't land and that one's kind of weird.
That one was really over the top.
Yeah. Funny is what you want to come away thinking about.
Yeah, there was I watched some of the morning news shows the next morning. There's a lot they couldn't air because it was too dirty to air.
Oh, there you go.
But the one that they often shared, which was funny, it was one of the few kind of making fun of Hillary, was something about it's amazing that the Trump administration was in contact with Russia when Hillary wasn't even in contact with Michigan.
Yeah, that was a good strong joke.
She's like, it's a direct flight. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was funny.
All right, so we got one.
Yeah.
No, she probably had more, but like you say, a lot of it you can't air. Can't repeat. Very good. So moving on to our next topic today. Man, thanks to Brian Bates, I have access to Netflix.
Oh, look at that.
I'm a Patreon supporter. He steals my Netflix.
There's a comedian out he lives in New York now. His name's Clinton Orr, and he has a joke in his show, and he says, "Does Netflix should have a button, forgot friends password."
That's pretty funny. But he hooked me up, I guess it was last November.
Yeah, it's been a few
Sounds
months.
about right.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while I'll kind of click in there to see who's putting out specials and what's going on. And then boom, like in the past couple of months, everybody not only sees the dollars that were dropped on the big contracts, like the $100 million for Seinfeld and that kind of stuff, but also the shorter ones they're putting out now.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few of them. And just pulling that feed up and trying to search through what comic I realize, and maybe I'm a little bit out of the loop, but after like the first 8 or 9 household names, there's like 30 guys and gals I've never heard of in my entire life, and good for them, but it just shows you, how many people are getting these things.
If you're thinking about getting into comedy and you're listening to this, don't do it.
Yeah.
We would urge you to give up. We're full. We're all full up.
In fact, if I could advise you to do anything, it would be to start a door-to-door barbecue service where you show up at somebody's house, you work the grill, so the host could just hang out and get something other than chips and sauce on the side. But yeah, there's quite a bit. And to be honest, here's the one thing, and I'll be curious what you guys think too. When you have access on Netflix to watch something, I find myself tapping out quicker and faster and more often than if I was going to sit down and make a night out of it watching it on TV where it's live or it's airing live. I've watched the last Chris Rock special, which I thought was halfway a money grab. I didn't feel like he didn't put as much work into that as some of the other great ones that he did. The one in DC with the shiny suit, I think, is still the bar to set for any comic in the past 15, 20 years. But very cathartic for him. And then after a certain point, I'm like, okay, I can delete this and go to the next, watch something else. Brian Regan I like, but after like the first 20 of his last one, I'm like, huh?
Yeah, I didn't care for it. And Radio City was way better.
Yeah.
And of course, he's done probably a perfect couple hours of stand-up comedy in his career. And that's the hard thing is he's got to follow Walked on the Moon. He's got to follow,
right.
Standing Up and the epitome of hyperbole. These are amazing specials. So I'm glad he's still creating, but yeah, his felt like a money grab to me too. These aren't done. These jokes aren't done.
When you had 2 or 3 year separation, like was kind of the normal for people back in the HBO Showtime days, then you took it on the road, you worked it up.
Yeah.
And I realize these guys did that to a degree, but it wasn't for 2 or 3 years. It was for a year. And so I just feel...
Louis ruined it. Louis ruined it for everybody. That's what Andy Kindler always talks about when he'll do like Just for Laughs or whatever he'll talk about, or Montreal. He'll say... He'll do the state of the industry.
Yeah.
And he'll usually make fun of Louis for ruining comedy by saying,
"Oh, comedy." I thought you were talking about having girls on tour with you.
Oh, sure that. But no, he said Louis ruined comedy 5 years ago when he said you throw away your hour every year and start over. And nobody was doing that before, really. A couple people maybe, but Louis made a huge thing like, if you have ethics as a comedian, you have to do this. And he's like, now you have these specials, and they're full of jokes that need like 6 more months of work, including Louis' specials.
Including Louis, like especially the last couple, I felt like you could have used some more time.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some jokes that were, I think, bad open mic quality jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, there really weren't any punchlines, just kind of graphic. You know?
I say that as somebody who's a fan of his work, and I think he's one of our generation's most amazing comedic minds. But yeah, you just go, this joke needed 6 more months, but he grabbed the money.
Yeah, and I can't blame him for that. I mean, I've got maybe 3 new minutes in the past 10 years or something like that.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
that
You're
sounds
on
right.
track.
But you just say it differently, and you pause
You
longer.
do a funny voice with it this time.
And you move it around.
Those
It's kind
twins
of
are getting older.
It's kind of like a shell game. It's like, oh, that was this close or nice.
But Kindler's thing in the State of the Industry was he said, like if you're, you've been working on the cure for cancer and you're 11 months in, you've almost found it. But he goes, but I threw away all the research. I'm just going to start over tomorrow, Like that's kind of how he compared it to.
I mean, I follow stand-up comedy really close. The comedians, and there's still comedians on there I've never even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are from other countries, but man, there's so many. And to your point, they have the stand-ups, which is a group. They've done this a couple times, a group of comedians, and because research shows that, like you said, 30 minutes, half hour, more likely people will watch than an hour. It's just time-wise.
Yeah, when I was a kid, MTV's half-hour comedy hour.
Which was 22 minutes of comedy.
22 minutes of comedy is great. And even Comedy Central Presents were 22 minutes long. So if you got your 30-minute Comedy Central Presents, it was 22 minutes. I remember the Brian Regan one in 1999. It blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
Unless I'm on a plane, because there are so many, I tend to watch maybe the first 5-10 minutes to kind of see the opening joke what they're about. And then sometimes I fast forward and see what the closer is. Because there's just so many.
I found some people that have stayed longer than 10 minutes watching. And I don't blame the comics really at all. But I'm wondering if Netflix and all the different platforms like that are just cannibalizing comics because it's such a binge watching type thing that people who love comedy will watch all these and then they're done. They just need to have 20 more next month.
Yeah.
And will that make the live performance a more of an in-demand thing for people who aren't doing those specials? Like I don't like you're not going to see too many guys holding out not doing a special, but the guys and gals that do maybe, and it's like 2 years since you've seen a full hour. And you can only go see it live, and they go on tour. That might be a lot more work because you're doing the tour instead of just releasing a special and making your 20 million or whatever these big names are getting. But
I wonder if it's the same effect on your show that we would see in the old days where you'd see somebody do a set on the Tonight Show or whatever, and then you'd go, well, that's burned. I wonder if it's the same net effect with Netflix where you go, well, I have my Netflix come out. Now I have to turn this show over. Or if you can still go. Because sometimes you know this. Sometimes you go to a show, you go do a show somewhere, and you're like, well, I better do this and this. I was here 18 months ago. And they get mad because you didn't do the hits. They wanted to, it's like if Skinner didn't do Freebird, they get mad that you didn't do the Barney Fife bit or whatever.
right.
You're like, well, I'm trying to work a new bit in. And they're like, no, you got to. So it's hard to know how to balance.
Well, I can only speak for Nate, but I mean, his Netflix special took him to a new level, and he references a joke now in his set from the Netflix special. When he asked the audience, are they familiar with it? The vast majority roar with approval. So they're there to see him because of the Netflix special.
And what I like about what he's done is he gives them the update.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, so they're like, well, a few things
have.
have happened since then. I got contacted by the guy who ran the alligator place,
Right.
And the crowd likes that. But he does that kind of towards the end, right?
Yeah, it's the very end.
So he's
that
giving
is
them
cool,
some
right.
newer stuff up front and go, okay, if you haven't heard these bits, here's a little piece of it, and here's the update, which I think is a good way to do it. And it's also a good way to figure out just audibly who's seen you and who hasn't.
Absolutely.
Without having to say, raise your hand, people respond accordingly.
Yeah.
It is pretty interesting. I always am curious about the behind the scenes of, when you throw stuff away completely. When I worked clubs a lot, especially they'd want you to do your bits that they were promoting because they'd be running them on the screen for the previous 4 weeks.
Oh, they want to make sure you did those.
But you've also, anybody that saw those for the 4 weeks had saw the whole bit.
Yeah, comedy's about surprise.
So you
What
would
did you
get
do?
people.
Wow.
Yeah, like you get people in the seats, and when you do the bit, they're nodding. You're like, well, I got half the response I normally get, but I got people in the seats because of that bit. So it's like a trade-off on your ego.
Yeah, that's weird. Didn't you say you did a church way back in the day and you got there and everything was like not landing quite right? You're like, man, then come to find out they'd shown your whole DVD or whatever.
Yeah, they'd play the first 5 minutes. Like they had 6 weeks of lead in, and so the first week they showed like 5 or 7 minutes, and the next week so they'd show my whole thing. And then I get there and they're like, hey, that's just what we watched.
That's I have a person who advances my shows, and that's part of what she does is she says 4 weeks out, play this clip, 3 weeks out, play this clip, and it does it. And I know what those are, so I can decide to either walk around those or not, or do them or not. But I usually choose not to do those because I'm like, well, that got them here, but sometimes you're right. They want to hear the thing that got you there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've talked about that music. People want to hear the classics.
Mm-hmm.
Comedy's different. You won't surprise. Unless you're a really big act, famous name, and Andrew Dice Clay, they want to hear some of those. The guys we work with, Killer Bees, he doesn't do Save Up anymore, but I think people want him to.
Is it true now he does Dynamite because Jimmy Walker's not using it?
Well,
Hamburger!
The patent just fell off.
Yeah, there's another example. Henry Cho, that I work with a lot, people often request him to do what's that clicking noise?
Yeah.
And JB and stuff like that.
The name of his special too. Yes, that's part.
Yeah,
of
there's some older comics that people.
Gaffigan was interesting. Gaffigan did T-Pack, which is a big theater here in Tennessee, in Nashville, where they do like big Broadway plays. So it's probably 2,500 seats or so. He sold it out, big theater show, puts his new hour out there. This is right after Mr. Universe, so he was probably workshopping the next special. But when he came out at the end for to take a bow. Second bow, he just did Hot Pockets.
Yeah.
He said everybody wants to hear Hot Pockets probably, so I've just had to relent. I'm just gonna do it. So
yeah.
If you don't know this, if you do know it, great. Everybody cheered, and Regan takes requests. That's the only comedian I've ever seen do that. I work with Tim Hawkins a lot, who's a more church market comic, but he has about 10 hours of material, 8 DVDs full of material. So he has fans going back, 20 years. And I said, you could do this. You just have to relearn the bits, which Tim really does throw away a lot of material. He really does turn his show over really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even know if it's about integrity of his show. I think it's just because he goes back to some of the same places every 18 months. So he feels that pressure to do it. But I think more than that, Tim's ADD, and he just gets tired of it. He's like, I did this for 18 months. I'm over it.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, man, I'm still crafting. I feel differently a little bit, But he's somebody who I think could easily walk out and they could shout out a bit. But I thought that was so cool when Regan did that.
Yeah.
Go do some bit that he did, Cup of Dirt, or do, the one in the middle's the sun and all. I mean, he would do it.
Yeah, the donuts and all those.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I decline a lot of requests. People ask me, get off stage, wrap it up. Look at the lights.
You're like, that's not a bit I do. No, seriously.
You're the opener. Why are you still up there? I declined so many requests from the audience. We want our money back.
25-minute merch pitch. What in the world?
We want our money back. There's just so many of them.
That's a lot of requests.
Pay for our babysitter. This is worse than we thought. You owe us money. I'm sorry. A lot of those things I just say no.
Right.
No is the most powerful word you can use in comedy.
I think you're right.
Because they come back again the next time still demanding those things. I still want my money back.
Leave them wanting more. And much
You've created a demand in the industry, and that's really they demanded that you stop.
I leave them wanting much more. That's right, like a full show.
Yeah, I think Andy Kendler used to do this thing where he would say, when I started out, they said Andy Kendler is the Jewish answer to Mac Davis, and that answer is no.
For some reason, it reminded me, Joby said, I used to have an opening line, or his introduction was, and he was recently voted tomorrow's biggest star. Please welcome Joby Stad. And he'd walk on stage, he goes, yeah, tonight you're just going to get regular old Joby. But come back tomorrow night.
Stars of tomorrow.
Something like that. That was one of my favorites.
The best opener for somebody who's not famous that I've ever heard was Claiborne's. And you just had Claiborne on the show, right? Mm-hmm. So when Claiborne gets introduced, he'll have them read this thing that says, this person coming to the stage has been featured on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, not once, not twice, but 0 times.
That's pretty good.
It's really great.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's the best line ever for somebody with no credits to use as an intro. It's so funny.
Did you, I'm totally changing subjects here, but I just want to give credit to, did you guys, Amy Schumer hosted Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
At the time of this, we're taping this past Saturday. And I don't know if you guys heard the controversy where she ran her monologue.
She jumped on stage somewhere is what I heard.
She jumped on stage at Caroline's. There was it's Tuesday night, I believe, and a guy doing a stand-up headlining set, which is it's a comedian who's not normally gets a chance to do a headline set. And I think he was just a little bit into his set, and he hears a voice off stage, and it's her, and she's asking, can I come up and do my monologue? So he gets off stage, she goes up and does it, and then he comes back up. And there's some controversy. Did you hear about this, Johnny?
No.
And some people criticizing her or whatever for it. But I'll give him full credit for how he handled it, which is the proper way. I don't know how he really felt, but publicly he said, this is the best thing that could ever happen to me because nobody would have been talking about my Caroline set. And now everybody is. And he's like, I'm perfectly fine with what she did. I get it. And so I have no problem with it. And she was very nice. Now she knows my name, which she didn't before and stuff like that. So I just thought, boy, that's a proper way to handle it for someone who's, could have gotten mad and probably went with the masses, like how dare she? But
right.
I thought he handled it correctly.
He probably knows there's a pecking order. That's the game. But I mean,
but a lot of people's egos get in the way.
Yeah.
And they're like, how dare she?
You ever been bumped like that, Rick, when you were doing clubs?
Usually just by the manager. We've had some more complaints coming back. We noticed a lot of silence. We thought the microphone was out.
Somebody here that's famous? No, we just need you to stop.
Yeah, we got a lot of times it's the guy in the kitchen who wants to do a set. Like we see he's struggling.
He just put the burgers on and he wants to do a quick set.
Yeah, so he's got about 8 minutes. Yeah. And I'm like, of material? No, 8 minutes before he's got to flip the burger. And so I usually give it to him because I'm hungry. Yeah, and that's my burger.
Absolutely.
I shouldn't have ordered it right before I hit the stage.
Whatever. Yeah.
And it's awkward to eat it while you're on stage, the burger, not just the comedy.
That's great.
So there's no, I can't think of a time. I've probably said multiple times on the podcast where I've had to stretch for headliners who didn't show up on time.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I haven't probably said it in a while, but the Tommy Chong was one. Do you remember that story?
Tommy Chong was late. I don't believe it.
Yeah, I'll say it again just real quick, and then we'll jump into our last little part today. But yeah, I was Detroit, Michigan. What was the name of the club? Chaplains. Mm-hmm. And it was like first night of the week, Wednesday or Thursday or whatever it started. And I'm middling, and as I get ready to go on stage, the manager of the club goes, Tommy's not here yet, but he should be. If he's not here, we'll send somebody up with a note to let you know to stretch a little bit. And it's my first time at the club, and I'm like, okay, whatever, he'll be here. And so I do whatever bit I was closing on at the time, and right as I'm hitting the last line, they put a note on stage, not here yet, do another 20. I'm like, okay. I said, just so you guys know, Tommy's got stuck in traffic or whatever. He'll be here in a few minutes. And so I do like 10 minutes of material, 10 minutes of kind of improv stuff, some games that I had from the improv group. And then I get another note, still haven't heard from Tommy, do another 30. Oh my gosh. And so I sent the door guy out I gave him my keys. He went out and got my guitar because I'd never had it with me. I wasn't going to play that week because I was featuring.
Yeah.
But I was going to practice, it's still in the car. So I said, go grab the guitar. So he went and got it, brought it in, spent a couple minutes kind of tuning it up, telling jokes. And the crowd's getting a little antsy. Yeah. But a lot of them have forgot about it, too, because they're smoking pot. Who are we here to see?
They're all high, too, yeah.
And so that was the first night I did that thing that every country song has one of these things. Right.
It
had been sitting in a notebook for like a month, but I was literally looking at my notebook going, what else can I do?
Oh, it made you do it, yeah. That's pretty interesting.
And it crushed that night after all that stress, an hour into a feature act. Then Tommy finally shows up. And the manager after the next day is like, hey, you're on our short list for headliners if we have a fallout or something. We didn't know you could do an hour. I'm like, I didn't know either.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. But it was, just the right crowd. They were kind of patient, tolerant, I guess. Mm-hmm. I could see where if it was another act where they were maybe less out of it and more demanding, they could have got restless.
I've had that happen to me where a two-man show and I'll come out and say, hey, so-and-so's here. That's like my opening thing when he's not really there. And then later on, he's not there when it's time for me to get off. So I'm like, well, I can't tell him that because I've already told him to give it up for him in the green room.
He saw my act and left. He can't follow this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's been times like that, though, where, to your point, Rick, about how, like, the situation caused you to stretch yourself. Like, that's definitely true of me. Like, I do a lot of conferences and things where they don't really understand how to use comedy yet, but they'll be like, well, we've got 3 days and we want you to do comedy in these 10-minute bursts over the 3 days. And you're like, that's not really how it works because it's going to be, I have to have beginning, middle, end in all these. Mm-hmm. But I would never sit down in my living room when I was starting doing comedy and be like, how can I have 7 great 10-minute sets? But when you get asked to do it and you take the check, and then you start having to prepare for it, you're like, I got to have 7 10-minute sets, and it makes you do it. And now I have those. Yeah. So it's like, but I never would sit down. I need to divide into these chunks. Everybody wants to get a good 10-minute spot for TV or whatever when you start, but to have that many in a row, like you would never sit around this. So it's being stretched like that has been beneficial to me, but I never would have. I sought it out on my own.
Yeah, that's what happened when I did cruise ships the first time.
Oh yeah,
because you had the multiple shows. I mean, you did the welcome aboard show where you're doing 7 minutes, and you got to be strong, or else they don't come back on Wednesday to see your full hour.
Auditioning. Yeah.
And then you got a good night, see you later. Sometimes you have a late night, midnight raunchy show, which I had to turn that down, but I still got the gig.
Really?
Yeah, Norwegian. They're like, we want to do a midnight. Everything goes, no holds barred.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't have that. I said, I will not do that. So if that's the deal breaker, I'm sorry. But what I do have is, if you want, I can bring my Barney Fife uniform and just stroll around the deck for a couple of hours Wednesday night, greet people, have some fun with them. And, I'll do that for 2 or 3 hours instead of the 1 hour dirty show. And they're like, if you do that, can we put you as a judge on our, dating game or whatever, our newlywed game? So they like, I can see how we could work this in there. But I wasn't going to
Did you have to do dating game questions to ask Mario? Gentlemen, what is your favorite place to make whoopee? Did you have to do like
No, I was just a judge, so they would say, which one do you think? Well, I don't know. Number 3 seems a little bit like they're holding back. I don't think they're really a couple. I think they're just on here for the free bottle of champagne, But that was the way I could stretch and do what I stay true to what my core beliefs are and all that without.
That's cool.
And can you give me their number?
Yeah, you could have done the late show.
Yeah.
Are you a comic who wants to take your comedy to the next level? Sometimes you need a little help, and that's where the Clean Comedy Challenge comes into play. This is Leslie Norris Townsend, and I'm the creator and producer of this challenging event. This year we have 3 different locations, each with a cash prize. 2 of the 3 are full-blown 3-day events with seminars, critiques, and performances in a real comedy club. Past attendees include Jonnie W., Charlene May, Andy Bedango, Marty Simpson, and Mike Paramar, all who are now full-time comedians. So, if you're ready to take advice from the pros and perform in a real comedy club, go to cleancomedychallenge.com. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. And don't forget to mention Rick Roberts' School of Laughs, so I know where you came from.
Well, the last thing I want to just kind of touch on is the brotherhood of comedy, the sisterhood, if you're listening and you're a lady, just the camaraderie and the unspoken, unwritten bonds you have with the comic that maybe you only worked with once. I mean, sometimes you even feel like you have a connection with comics you've never seen live, but you've seen so much of their stuff, you can totally relate to their point of view. But specifically today, when you've worked with somebody, haven't seen them in 10 or 15 years, I think my case, it must have been 14 years or so, or 13. But, Spanky Brown just passed away this past week. And, a lot of people, he was on the road so much that almost every comic that I worked with him at some point, and you two included, it sounds like. So what was your memory of Spanky and just your thoughts on what it's like when you hear somebody that you liked, you had good memories of, just passed away and you hadn't spoken to him in forever?
Yeah, and I think the brotherhood, you talk about that, like even when I was having my dissertation on Michelle Wolfe, like I kind of, there's a tinge of that where you just go, well, this is a working comic. I'm more likely to side with her than some crowd.
Right.
Just because I know what it's like to prepare and to go in and know it's going to be hostile or whatever. And when you've been to war with somebody like that, you just kind of go, well, I'm going to listen to her part of it. Dave Chappelle even had a thing where he was kind of a joke, but he said, I realize I identify more as a comedian than even as a black man when I watched Michael Richards do his famous rant at the Laugh Factory where he said the N-word 60 times in a row. He said, because I was sitting at home and I was thinking, you can get them back, Kramer. Don't lose them, Kramer. He said, I think I identify more as a comedian than a black man. It's such a funny true thing. And to that point, like, Spanky is somebody who's like larger than life, just a big teddy bear, and everybody kind of has a story where he gave them I was sharing a story online about he let them stay at this house because the comedy condo was full or whatever, and he said park down the street because you won't have to pay. Little things like that comedians are like, it saves your life because you're just like, this is everything. I mean, I'm barely making $30 tonight or $40. Like, you saved me. And there's a million stories like that about this dude. But I just remember how in control he was and how likable he was on stage. I was telling you guys before, but the line I always remember him using that I've used more than once in a small room, it's just kind of an icebreaker line. But if you're in a room and it's a very under-attended show and it's kind of like, oh boy, this room holds 100, only 30 people came, I don't know what I'm going to do. He went up one night and I was with him and he said, guys, look, we're going to have a good time. I'm under no obligation because of the size of this crowd to have a good show.
Yeah.
Because y'all aren't enough people to start a rumor. And I thought, what a funny line. And it immediately put the crowd at ease and he crushed. And those 30 people always remember that show probably.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I love that about him. And I think he was just a tender-hearted guy. He cared about people.
Yeah.
So I don't remember a ton of his jokes. I remember him as a person. So I think that's a good legacy.
Yeah. You work with him, Brian?
I didn't actually. I met him once at Side Splitters in Knoxville. He was very nice, but never worked with him, and but always heard great things about him, and kind of certainly. But I've certainly, to your point, lost good close friends, comedian friends that in the business. And to your point, there's comedians I've never met, but you still feel that kindred spirit. Not that you wouldn't feel that for anyone that passes away suddenly, but there's always there's a brotherhood like you talked about.
Yeah. I think one thing I just kind of thought about as we're discussing this is when you even spend a little time in the bar area or the green room with a comic, there's not really a lot of small talk. It's long talk. It's like, how's it going?
Right.
And like within minutes, if not seconds, you get down to how things are really going in that person's life. Yeah. Comics are pretty open to other comics about that, where they might not be that way with the staff or the management or whatever, but they'll, man, it's not going that good. If you got any gigs, hook me up, or,
right.
And so you kind of know somebody deeper, quicker.
Yeah.
When you're in that kind of situation with them. Whereas if you just watched the show or saw them on TV, you wouldn't know those things. And whereas some of your casual friends, you never get into a deep conversation with. I mean, it's always just real surface. Everybody's putting on, hey, everything's great, Mm-hmm. But comics pretty much let you know.
Yeah, we don't do small talk much. Air it out on stage and in the green room.
Yeah, and then you also, especially if you know the comic or at least have seen him, I usually start off with referencing a bit that I love. Like, man, I just saw whatever bit you did, and I've been trying to write a bit about that for 20 years, and you summed it up so perfectly, and I really respect that. And because there's regardless of the comic, whether Michelle Wolfe or Spanky or you two guys, there's always jokes where I respect that, and I know you've been working on it, and I see the craft behind it, and it's important, I think, for us to say those things in the moment and tell people we respect them, we enjoy what they're doing, give them a little pat on the back on the way out, so that if it is the last time you're going to see somebody, I mean, especially when you get to, if you're only headlining, you're not working with the headliners anymore. You might be at a showcase or a festival audition or some kind of taping, and those are treats because you get to bump into those people and like catch up, and that can be a span of 10 or 15 longer,
Yeah.
I think feature acts have it really good where you're seeing the new people come in,
right?
You're getting to work still. You might headline some, but you're working with headliners that you can get to know with for a week at a time, or at least a weekend at a time, the way clubs are booked now. Yeah, it is interesting. I just think got to take time when we're traveling around to let people know, and also just touch base once in a while with comics. It's something I should probably do more often. If it's just reach out, hey, how's it going? Sometimes you don't want to prepare yourself for the answer, and oh boy, what did I get myself into?
Right.
But what if you don't ask out, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're not there anymore? And a lot of times, unfortunately, with comics, it's health issues because we're eating wrong. Heart attacks a lot, Tim Wilson, that was one that hit me pretty hard because I worked with him, man, over the years, probably 25 weeks, not even exaggerating, and got to know him pretty well, and always look forward to seeing what I would love to see his take right now on the government, on where we're at, millennials. He could have a 2-hour millennial bit.
Yeah.
He was that prolific, and that his point of view was so centered in him that he could take things he didn't believe in and make you think he did, obviously, with how strong his writing was. But that was another guy where, I always said enjoyed working with you. Probably never slapped him on the back, gave him a hug or anything like that. Right. He wasn't exactly a huggy kind of guy, but but just like a huge presence that you'll miss. Yeah. And you got to really, I always say too, grab a picture with somebody backstage so you have those memories too. I wish I'd have done that from the very beginning.
Yeah, first comedy show I ever went to, I was probably 21 or 22. And I saw Richard Jeni and Kevin Meaney co-headline at the Tennessee Theater in Knoxville. They each did 45. Richard Jeni closed. And I couldn't. I mean, I grew up watching Richard Jeni, but I mean, I think he killed himself probably 5 years after that.
I think the year after he got Comedian of the Year, because he was like, that was that early 2000s?
It hit me hard because I was like, that guy was part of my childhood. I mean, it felt like I was losing a childhood friend.
Yeah. Did you ever see Richard Jeni?
I didn't, not live.
Oh man,
I don't know if it's online on YouTube somewhere, but so every comic had an OJ bit. You know, there were certain things. He had an OJ special basically. It had to be 40 minutes on OJ, and if that's online anywhere, every comic listening to you should just Google that, find it, and you think Seinfeld turns the Rubik's Cube around on an angle.
Yeah.
Try 40 minutes
Right.
on OJ. That was all fresh. It wasn't any of the stuff any of the other comics were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he turned the stage into a courtroom. I remember the one part that I was impressed with, just a little minor thing, but you know, he took the microphone off the stand, put the stand over here for a while, and then he took his suit jacket off and put it on the stand and made that a defendant in the case. So like he had somebody else on stage to
great.
talk to.
Yeah, that's great.
Like it was just a lot of
That's really
theatrical touches, but a guy who was exhausted every possible
Yeah.
angle, and it was very physical, acted things out, did voices. I mean, he was really a total package.
Mm-hmm.
He had a sitcom, Platypus Man, for a short while. It was like
Right.
on the WB or something, or UPN or whatever those stations were back then. But just another great comic who obviously you could even announced out loud, I'm going through a lot of problems.
Right.
And sometimes we push back from helping those people out. We probably should lean in a little bit more
Yeah.
so it doesn't get to be the problem.
Well, you pay tribute to Tim Wilson in your act. You do a voice.
I've got one voice
Wilson voice.
in the drive-through where I do a little tip of the hat to Tim where so I knew to needed glasses when I'd pull up to a drive-through and I couldn't read what was on the screen. So I just ordered what I thought they had. I'm like, I'll take a double cheeseburger, some onion rings, and a Coke. She's like, sir, we can't do that here. This is Bank of America. Oh, I'm in the wrong drive-through for sure.
Tim Wilson.
Yeah.
I never knew that. That's funny.
Yeah, that's just straight, just like a shout out to him every single show.
Yeah.
And but he used,
Yeah.
But that voice, ma'am. I tell you, who does a good one is Tommy Blaze. He probably does the best Tim Wilson impression. He used to call. Well, Tommy told me he used to call Krista Pett and leave messages as Tim Wilson and confuse each other.
And you would believe him?
I think so.
Oh, that's
Anyway, so I guess the bottom line, just make sure you connect with your buddies. Don't let them go too far without touching base. And you don't have to think too hard about the legacy you're leaving, but it's not a bad idea to always have that in the back of the mind. Make sure you're making an impact on somebody else while you're out there. So when you do pass, there's good things. Luckily, unfortunately, the good guys are passing, but we're hearing good things about them on the other side of it. So that's going to wrap it up this time on the School of Laughs podcast. Thanks, Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
You can always find out more about Jonnie W at,
JonnieW.com.
and he's on Twitter at,
Johnny_W.
and you can find out more about Brian at.
BrianBatesComedy.com. Twitter's Brian Bates Comic.
Very good. Thanks, guys.
You bet.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Always good to hang out with Jonnie W. and Brian Bates. You've heard them often on here because they're buds of mine and they live close by, and we try to get together at least once every couple of months, it seems like, if not a little bit more often than that, grab a bite to eat and enjoy each other's company. So that was great. Thanks for listening to that. Don't forget the Clean Comedy Challenge is right around the corner. You want to get involved with that, cleancomedychallenge.com. And what else can I tell you? The Christian Comedy Association Conference is right upon us. If you're listening to this on release date Friday, June 1st, then you have a couple of days left before we start. We start on June 3rd. And even if you're not attending the conference, you can attend one of the best Christian comedy shows you'll see all year long. It happens at Oasis Church, and that church is located just south of Nashville, just barely south of the Bell Road, Old Hickory Boulevard intersection of Nolensville Road down in Lenox Village. Show starts at 7. Tickets are $15. You'll see 11 different comics, some heavy hitters going on the show that night, including Darren Streblow, Bob Smiley, Jason Earls, Allison Moore, Lisa Mills, Kristen Weber. I'm leaving off a few because I don't have the information right in front of me, but it's going to be a killer show. You want to check that out. And then if you are interested in pursuing comedy through the lens of a Christian, we have sessions on Monday and Tuesday, nonstop sessions, 9 to 5, breakouts, keynotes, guest speakers, and then also another comedy show Monday night at Oasis Church. That will be more of a pro-am where you'll see some of our best, but also some of our newest and brightest comedians doing their thing. Tickets for that show, only $5, and that's Monday night at Oasis Church. Same start time, 7 p.m. So check that out. Hopefully I'll see you out there at one of those shows, at the conference in general, or just down the road. I'll be at Huckabee doing my thing again on actually tonight, June 1st, and then on the 8th of June as well. And those shows start at early 6:30. They want you over there. The shows start about 7 o'clock, and I'm usually on in the first half hour. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for listening. Give a shout out, send an email, make a phone call to one of your comedy buddies. Let them know you're thinking about them, seeing how they're doing, and stay in touch with those folks. Because if you don't, you might wake up one day and they may not. Stay safe, stay cool, and stay funny.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.